Alright, so we did a video the other day on this old school framer's hatchet as a nice replacement or competitor to something like a Wetterlings or Grand First Brooks small forest axe. But one downside to this is that it doesn't come with a sheath, so we're not going to do a video here on making a sheath. You don't need much. You need a slab of fairly heavy-duty leather. If you had nothing else, you could literally do this with an old belt. You'll also need some sort of thread, something of a little bit thicker, heavier duty quality would be a plus. A thread and a needle. That's pretty much it. Let's get to it. So there's more than one way to do this, but for the sake of what we're doing here, I've already pre-measured to about what I'm looking for, which is this sort of a fold-over design, and that measured out to give me approximately 2.5 inches by 9 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out real quick. The basic idea I have going on, I have this main piece of leather that's going to fold over basically like this to create that kind of a wrapped section of that of the sheath. Then I have this, which I believe they call a welt, and it's kind of just a piece of leather that rides against the actual edge of the axe and kind of prevents the axe from cutting your stitching, preemptively cutting your stitching. So I have that, and then I also, where'd that other piece go? Yeah, I have a little small piece right here that slips in and continues that welt up roughly an inch from the corner. So including both of them from there to there, about an inch. So that'll give it a nice little base, and then I'll show you how we'll keep this sheath from coming off here in the future. So one of the things you're going to need for this is some sort of a punch, leather hole punch. There's a combo kit that comes with a couple of them, or a few of them even. You can also do this with an awl, just a single awl. It will take a lot longer that way. But yeah, I would recommend getting one of these multi-hole punches here. Yeah, they seem to work quite nicely. Okay guys, so I'm starting to sew here, and one of the things I wanted to mention that I'm doing is I am starting on the end and working my way back to the apex of this fold. And the reason is, if I started from the apex of this fold, I may find the center a little bit off kilter, or a little bit off kilter the other way. And if I start here and work my way back evenly, it'll come back to that nice point. One thing I might mention, if I could do this over, I might not punch holes all the way around. That's something to think about. I'm not going to stop now. I'm going to keep going. But yeah, we'll sew this here. Actually, let me show you. There's different schools of thought for sewing. You can do several different types of stitches. One way that is, I think, more of an old school method is whip stitching, I think they call it, which is basically just go around and around and around and around and around and around and around, not inside the same way. So this, like, whip stitching wouldn't be hiding the stitching. Whip stitching would have the stitching all along the edge of this, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that. You know, the disadvantage is, of course, your thread can wear down over time and potentially break if you don't have a higher quality thread, and just by nature of it being exposed. I mean, that's kind of true. The advantage is that if you don't have any real means of finishing the potential unevenness of the edge of your sheath, and you want the crisscrossed pattern of that whip stitch, that can be like a nice alternative as a finish. So it could accomplish the look that you're going for. I struggle really to decide which one I'm going to go for. I think I'm going to go with the, I mean, this is probably an old school method too, but it's the, yeah, so I mean, I'm probably going to go with this type of a stitching where the thread is, you know, going to look like that on the side, as opposed to around and around and around on this exterior like this. You know, rudimentary idea, but more like that. And the reason being, if I did that alternative, it might give a finish that's potentially better looking, depending on the eyes of the beholder, but it will more objectively be more vulnerable to getting scraped up, and if it gets scraped up, possibly ripping, then you might have to restitch your leather sheath faster, whereas this way the stitching is hidden and more protected by that welt and by the edges of the leather. So I'm going to go with this hidden stitch method. I don't know the name. There is a name for this, but in any rate. Okay, so I've done one direction of stitching, and I'm about to go back the other direction. So I'm going to try and zoom in here. You can see it, every part where there's a stitch, it skips a little bit of leather, which we don't necessarily want. We want to go back the other direction, and as we do, it's going to fill in every one of those gaps, and there'll be a stitch across every little bit of that leather. That will make this more like the more traditional, or the stitch that I see most people doing, which is where they have a piece of thread coming out both directions, they pull tight, and then they put 2 needles through both directions in the same hole, and then they pull tight. That's a great stitch, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is mostly the exact same stitch. It's just using 1 needle, so there's less barrier to entry, as it were. And I'm trying to make this as friendly to people who have very little tools as possible. Like I say, you could do this type of a thing literally with an old belt. That would be doable. So now that I have this, I'm going to run back and get the other direction of sewing, and then we'll do the same thing here with this little piece right here. We'll stick this in here and we'll sew that up, and then we'll be almost completely done, and I'll show you the retention mechanism for keeping this from falling off your axe. Okay, so this is how where we're going with this here. I've got the sheath finished, and I'm putting a hole right there pretty close to the steel. That might be too close, but I'm going to work with it and see how it goes, because it may stretch into place. I'm going to put a hole there, and yeah, that's going to be the way that we keep this from coming apart. You don't even need a snap for this. Of course, if you had a snap, you could just put it right there, and it would be pretty easy to deal with. But I'm going to show you how to do it without a snap if you don't have a snap. All right, well, there's different ways you could have done this, and this is the way that I did it. I'm going to go ahead and show you. I turned the camera off and just started working for a while, but you can see the idea of what I have going on here. So instead of just 1 hole there with the awl, I made 2 larger holes, large enough to fit 1 string of paracord through on both sides, the green string. And then on this side, I didn't do anything too special. I just made a standard overhand knot and then a series of cobra stitches or weaves. And so this takes the place of a cord lock, essentially. You could just use a cord lock without this. But if you're going to use it as a cord lock, you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little loops on the sides. That's what I found works best for me. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo, and that's going to be slightly difficult because I have one hand on the camera. I'll see if I can make this work here. But whenever you're putting the sheath on, you want to make sure that you hook underneath the edge so that you don't cut your paracord, and then watch the top too so that you don't cut your top leather as much. But basically that's on now, and now to tighten this, it's essentially the same type of a situation as you would have for a cord lock, and obviously it's much easier with 2 hands. But actually, I might have to put you down for a second. But there you go. Okay, so this is not wanting to come off now. This would be plenty enough retention for you to slide this into, behind the pocket of something like an Alice pack or Bushcraft style pack, or even carry inside your backpack. Obviously, there are other ways of doing retention than this, but I wanted to give you a way of doing this that did not require much in the way of specialty tools, and for me, I wanted to eliminate as many of those tools as possible. So this is a way of doing it without having like a set for putting in grommets or eyelets or snaps. Yeah, there's a way to do it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Appreciate it.